All right, Max Nation. I'm Ungar to the Max coming at you with this week's episode of the SportsRoom Talk Show, and we are previewing this Week 2 matchup between the 0-1 Cleveland Browns and the 0-1 Jacksonville Jaguars. And first of all, thank you to everyone who has subscribed. We have hit 600. That is just mind-blowing. And in fact, one of the guys who recently subscribed and helped me reach 600 is here to preview this matchup between the Cleveland Browns and Jacksonville Jaguars, which is going down this Sunday at EverBank Stadium, not EverBank Stadium. It's some marketing ploy by the Jaguars, I guess. But we got Cardiac Cats with us. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I I couldn't help but laugh here in the name of the stadium. It was it's almost kind of cringe, but I think it's funny. And we all thought he was getting his hair cut, but unfortunately, we don't get to see something crazy like that.
Right.
No, I saw you're at like the 599 mark. I was like, how do I not subscribe? Like, this is the perfect opportunity.
I
So
do I do greatly appreciate it. And as we mentioned, the Cleveland Browns are taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. And even though I am a diehard Browns fan, don't worry. I've got some Jaguars memorabilia. I've got that little pennant right
beautiful.
there. Um, and I've got a mini Jaguars helmet right there. Um, and as you and I were kind of talking about this matchup off mic, it's always fun for me when the Browns play the Jaguars because my second favorite player of all time just so happened to be a running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I have his jersey. He's now a color commentator for the Los Angeles Rams, and I think he's an analyst on NFL Network. But there you go, Maurice Jones-Drew. Um,
Yeah, it's beautiful. He's like the one guy who will choose us in games most of the time, wherever we see those predictions. But it's
yes,
it's always like 1-9. It feels like.
yeah. I think most analysts are picking the Jaguars to win this game. And I mean, how could you not pick the Jaguars after the, just an abysmal showing by us last week in our home opener in America's Game of the Week with Tom Brady making his broadcasting debut? We go out and play like that against the Dallas Cowboys. Just hot garbage. Ugh. I
Well,
don't know if you go ahead.
uh, it's funny to hear that because you'd hear the exact same thing from the Jaguars fan base. I mean, we call it hot garbage as well. Our team went up like 17-0. They were about to go up 24-7 going into the end of the third quarter. Fumble on the
Right.
1 yard line, which I want to say this credit to Javon Holland, the Miami safety. He is phenomenal. And that was all him on that play. And they collapsed, right? And it's the same thing from last year where there's like no one steps up in the big moments. So we're all feeling very similar, but I get it. It's like it's the battle of two teams that have just been punched in the face as hard as possible in week one. Very different reasons, but I really don't think this is a lock for anyone. I will not say that here. I think Jacksonville is capable of losing a game, and I also think I could see them going in and just having a great game because Cleveland's injured. Cleveland has quarterback questions, and maybe Jacksonville has a good week, but it's hard to bet it.
Yeah. Um, you guys were up 14-0. Um, you had a 17-7 lead at halftime against the Dolphins. Which, speaking of the Dolphins, prayers for Tua Tagovailoa, who suffered another concussion last night. Um, I don't know what Tua's going to do, but the
Yeah.
dude just keeps getting injured. And the more unfortunate part was that it was against DeMar Hamlin. Of course, we all know his story. So the fact that it was the two of them involved, just unfortunate circumstances. So
It's
stay,
surprising.
yeah,
It's like I have all the people to be in that situation, but it was so hard to watch because you knew once he started running and he didn't slide. Like I had a moment. It was almost like time stopped, and I know a couple people I talked to kind of felt the same way, where you just saw it and you're like, he's going to get a concussion on this play. There's no way he's going to make this contact and not get a concussion. And he's on the ground, after that with a concussion. And it's like, I don't know what you do. If you're him, I don't know what you do if you're Miami. It's such a difficult situation because there's not really a I don't know. I mean, if it's a matter of his life or money, his life is more important, right? But
For sure.
it's going to be so tempting to do the thing you love and also get paid like 53 million a year doing it. So I don't know. I feel terrible for him being in that situation because this is not something that's normal, and
Right. This is
I
like
don't know.
his
I don't know
third.
what else to say aside from that.
Yeah, I think this is like his third or fourth concussion since he's been drafted by the Dolphins. So it's just a tough situation. But
Yeah,
hey, you want to talk about tough situations at the quarterback position? Your opponent this week, us, because I don't want to get into all the off the field stuff with
for sure.
with the Deshaun Watson stuff, but of course he's in the news again. We all know why. It, that's why he was suspended for 11 games in 2022, which the NFL can deny it all they want. They intentionally made it 11 games so that he would make his Browns debut in
Yeah,
Houston against the Texans. They can deny it all they want. You know that's the truth. I don't care.
it's so dumb. Like I remember reading that and I was like, "Oh, yeah, 11 games. Never had a suspension that length and he just happens to play the Cleveland Browns." It's like that kind of tells you where the NFL
Yeah.
is, right? It
Personally,
tells you what they care about.
Personally, I would have had him make his Browns debut in Miami against the Dolphins because if you remember, like the Dolphins were the ones that were so heavily connected to Deshaun Watson for a while. Like, oh, the Dolphins are going to trade for Deshaun. So I think the storylines there would have been so much, so much fun to dive into and all that. But nonetheless, um, Deshaun did not look good last week against the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, um, they were just rattling his cage all game long. You know, once Dallas realized the Browns were going to be a one-dimensional team, they just pinned their ears back, and even if they couldn't get the sack on him, they rattled his cage. They made him uncomfortable in the pocket. And I was in the stands for that game, and I'm just like, Deshaun, what are you doing? What?
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to be in the stands for that game.
Yeah, it was bad. Um, but, on the opposite side, your man Trevor Lawrence got a pretty nice contract extension.
He did. He did. I had my thoughts on that and I think
Okay.
they're different from what most people have from the Jaguars community that would be, but it was a situation where I was hoping they would wait. And I wasn't in the it feels like with things regarding the Jaguars, you seem to be one way or the other and there's no in the middle. And I
Sure.
felt like with Lawrence, like he had proven things, but in this day and age where a lot of teams are just not they may call them championship contenders, but they're paper tigers a lot of the time in the playoffs. I wanted to see from Trevor Lawrence, like make that run back to the playoffs, make those big plays and big moments. And since 2022, where he was arguably the best of anyone except maybe Mahomes at doing that, it hasn't been the same since then. And so I was hoping they would wait and just send send a message that like you have to earn this, right? We're talking about $55 million a year. This is the most money of anyone in the league. Like your production, your play, aside from the end of the 2022 season, simply put, didn't really line up. And I get you gotta in this market pay a lot of money for your quarterback, but I would have been very cautious, with 2 years left. a lot of time to make a decision. I didn't think it was something where, the player's going to go sit out if you don't extend him or anything like that. But the counter argument is, Dak Prescott just drove the market to $60 million a year. So I
Yeah.
get it.
By the way, the draft where Lawrence was taken number 1 overall. That was here in Cleveland. I was there in person for that.
Oh, nice.
So I saw Lawrence get drafted. Well, kind of, because he didn't come to the draft.
Yeah, he was at home.
Yeah.
Those are really fun experiences going out to the draft. I've been to, I guess, one now in Kansas City.
Yeah.
That was great. Had a good pick as well.
Yeah.
Year.
So
of course he didn't have a good first week, but we'll see.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit. You live in Missouri, but you're a Jaguars fan.
Yep, it's not normal, Although I did see one time like a Facebook ad that said I could get a shirt that said I live in Missouri and I support my Jaguars. I didn't buy it though. But I'm from Florida originally.
Okay.
Lived there for like 4 or 5 years and then ended up moving to Missouri. But I've always liked the Jaguars. I've always been partial to them. And kind of growing up, a lot of the time I tend to root for underdogs, right? And Jacksonville's always been an underdog. They've always been a team that's looked over. They've always been the team that's like, we hate them. They're going to move to London. They don't deserve to be in the NFL. Like a lot of fans just in general are kind of harsh towards them. And I've just generally liked the team a lot. And I made a choice, when I really started watching football in 2017 to support them. It was a great year to make that choice because they just out of nowhere made this incredible playoff run and then of course blew up, which is kind of what they do at times. But I love the city. I love the fans. I love talking to them, and I've already just in the last 2 years gone down there 3 times, maybe a fourth here soon. It's an easy team to root for though.
Yeah.
So
it's hard for yes, I'll be rooting against the Jaguars this week, obviously.
Yeah.
But by the same token, like I said, my second favorite player of all time played for the Jaguars, MJD, and one of your owners also just so happens to be the main guy when it comes to my favorite wrestling show, All Elite Wrestling.
Okay.
Of course, I'm talking about Tony Khan.
Yeah, we've heard of him.
I loved that during the draft he had the neck brace on, but when they were in the pandemic era and they couldn't have fans, they were doing all their shows at Daly's place outside of EverBank Stadium. Which, okay, before we get more into the game, what do you think of these massive renovations that they're going to be making to the Jags Stadium? Because I've seen them; they look drastic.
So I do a little bit of, it's feel like it's off topic almost, but I do a lot of graphic design in my free time, so I have opinions as far as the way things look and are represented.
Mhm.
I didn't love it at first. I love it more now, and they're probably gonna like change certain things on it. I think the design looks great. The only gripe I have is why the heck are there wooden paneled floors in the stadium? It sounds dumb, right? That was like one of my first thoughts though, because I'm very like into that sort of stuff. But I think it's going to be phenomenal to attend. I think the outside atmosphere is great. Today, I saw something that they got a community renovations part of the bill passed, which is good. I have to look back into that and what that all means, but I know that was a hiccup in the process. But this is going to be a fun stadium. It's going to be a lot nicer out to go to games because you're going to have some shade there. I thankfully have not had to experience that yet because I've gone to 2 games. The one was raining a little bit and wasn't super hot in September, shockingly for Florida. And then the other one I actually was like freezing, which was the Chargers playoff game.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of that, if I'm the Jaguars, I'm going to wear my white jerseys on Sunday and force the Browns to wear their home brown jerseys because in that Florida heat, you'll take any advantage you can get.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's not a bad point. We also got to make sure everyone's wearing the white shoes. So if your toes over the line, can't see it as well. And then if you
Yeah. Um, but, you know, the Browns have now won 2 straight against the Jaguars, but I'm looking at the history of the matchup. You guys lead the overall series against us 12-7 with, like I said, us getting the win in 2023 and 2020. But prior to that, you guys won 3 straight against us in 2013, 2014, and 2017. Of
yeah,
course,
I mean,
20. Go ahead.
I was gonna say we just really haven't got to play a whole lot. Which I mean, obviously we're both AFC teams, so it's a little more often. But it kind of shocked. It's only 19 games over the history of these
Yeah.
franchises, with Jacksonville going into its 30th year now. But yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
Like
think
I was
that's
thinking
part
about
of it.
before, and yeah, it's not really like I know for Jacksonville, there's not anything unique, I guess, about like the matchup against the Browns. Or it's not like there's like I don't think we factor in the history too much. Whereas like some teams we might, I
Like when
think
you
now there's a
play
little bit of a rivalry
Tennessee
with
and
of
Houston.
division for sure. Yeah. Maybe with the Bills a little bit, I would say at this
Okay.
point, because we got a lot of players from there this offseason, and like Gabe Davis and Mitch Morse. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of something going.
Maybe you have a little bit of history with Pittsburgh too.
That's the best example. I was trying to think of which one I was missing there, but Pittsburgh is a long history for
I
sure.
I definitely remember when you went into Pittsburgh and beat them in the 2007 like divisional round, I think it was.
Yeah, the only one I remember watching was the 20 would have been the 2017 season. That was a
Yes.
shootout. It was like 45-42. Blake
Yeah.
Bortles masterclass, which you don't get to say that very often.
I know. Uh,
You
think
know?
about this. I brought this up with my Cowboys content creators last week. You guys have been to an AFC Championship game more recently than the Cowboys. Or let me rephrase that. The
Yeah.
your Jaguars have been to a conference championship game more recently than the Cowboys. Think about that. Like just like 7 years ago in 2017, you were in the AFC Championship game. Arguably should have won that game against the Patriots. Sorry to bring up bad memories
No,
there.
that's all right. It's been a long time.
Um, but meanwhile, the Cowboys haven't been in the divisional round since 1995, something like that. All right, so
Yeah.
we
I think even the Jets probably have won more recently. I mean, let's note that. Wasn't that with gosh, who was the
Mark
quarterback?
Sanchez.
Mark Sanchez. Haven't they gone more recently?
Yeah. So we have a question here from Grandizer. He's
All right.
for you. He said, "Which 3 Jags rookies have impressed you the most, if any?"
Okay, so for this rookie class, I I think from week one you have to start with Brian Thomas Jr. Like there's literally no way I can't do that
Definitely.
because he had a phenomenal week and he just looks ready. He looks ready for the moment. He's chirping on the field at Ramsey. Fans love to see that specifically, but he just looks good, And when they drafted him, my thoughts on his development is I thought it would be, a few years, and it might still be for all we know, where he's just kind of getting better and better. I look kind of at like a light version of maybe like CD Lamb. Not saying the players in the way they play are the same, but CD Lamb didn't exactly come out and light the NFL on fire, but he was still a good receiver. He got better and better. And then last year, he just absolutely broke out on the scene. I felt like ETJ could have kind of a lighter version of that, but he's starting off as the wide receiver one. It's really impressive to see from him. He looks like a great player right now. He's got more detail in his routes. He's playing he's playing at a higher level. The
Yeah.
next one I'd have to mention, I don't know if I'll have 3 here, but Cam Little, I have to mention the kicker. It seems like a weird one, but I love the
Okay.
pick. I actually gave him an A+ for it at the time. Youngest kicker, I think, to start maybe in the NFL or something like that. Or youngest kicker drafted, but he's been phenomenal. Like huge leg on him. The guy can play in big moments, and he was a great pick for Jacksonville. Other than that, Mason Smith, I haven't seen a whole lot from. He's going to be developmental, so I can't really include him. If I'm going with someone that hasn't really impressed me like during the season, but I think could be really good, I think Jarion Jones, who we might see this weekend with the Tyson Campbell injury. I think Jarion Jones is going to be a really good player eventually. I think
Yeah,
he's the guy they're going to groom for the slot. He's really good in coverage. The questions with him are more so with like the size disadvantage, which could be an
sure.
issue with him possibly playing outside this week. And then you also just have this general tackling issue. Makes it look like he's bad in run defense, which when I watched him, he was in position a lot of the time, but he just hasn't been a great tackler from college. And so I think he's someone who, if he can figure that out, which tackling's hard to figure out at the NFL level, to be
Right.
fair,
Yeah.
he could be really good. And I think he could be the eventual, I guess, Darnell Savage replacement, because that's primarily where he's been playing is in the slot.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how your defense adjusts with these two key injuries. Because
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but like Tyson Campbell and Darnell Savage, you picked both of them off this offseason, didn't you?
So Tyson, we drafted him, and we just extended him recently, which
Okay.
the one question with the extension is always going to be injury because he's been injured like every year of his career. But he is
Oh,
a phenomenal corner when he's on the field.
yeah.
So that's where you're going to go with that. But if you got a good backup, you're okay with it, right? As long as he's there for like when you play in the playoffs. Now, Savage, we did acquire this offseason. I didn't know a whole lot about him before, but I know he's a guy that generally has really good skills for the slot. I think the main question was his run defense, which I'll actually look on PFF right now as we're talking. But he was a player that I've heard Green Bay fans for quite a while just beg to play in the slot, and he's finally getting his chance. Which, yeah, run defense, he had his best year last year, but generally been subpar in that department as a tackler. And that's what you got to do if you're going to come down and play in the slot and play, kind of in the box. You're going to have to be able to tackle. So that's kind of the one concern with him. But it was a good deal. It was like $7 million a year.
I would say the Browns are going to come out and, run the ball down your throats, but we didn't really do that against Dallas last week. Our offense was just kind of, the short to intermediate passes and a
Yeah,
lot of screen plays. And I'm just like, why are you not running the freaking ball? Like, that was one of Dallas's weaknesses
he built
defensively
for it.
last year was they are not good against the run. I get it. We don't have Nick Chubb for these first 4 games, which is obviously a detriment. But still, like, if you want to pass the ball, a great way to do that is by running the ball because you bring the safeties down into the box and boom, you have more field open, deep for guys like Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah,
I
you can't threaten the team in just one way.
Right.
They'll eventually adjust, and that's been a Jacksonville problem as well because they last year it was a lot of like screen passes, these 5 yard outs. They weren't able to run the ball because the least important thing I've found to this team is getting guys who can block in the run game. I don't know why. They have no interest in it at all. They don't care what you do in the run game. They just they take whoever's good in pass protection. Even that has been somewhat questionable. But Jacksonville's like consistently been a really bad run blocking offensive line. But going to your point with the defense, or sorry, we'll talk about our run defense versus your rushing attack. I think even maybe if you don't have those tackles in this game, which is one of the injuries to watch, Jacksonville's not necessarily a great run defense. I might be proven wrong, but this was an area where they've kind of struggled. They lost Fadikasi this offseason, who was overpaid, but still, like, decent against the run, had some good games, and they didn't really take an opportunity, I felt like, to get a really good replacement. Now, they've got Trayvon Walker, who, you can give him crap as a pass rusher if you want. Everyone does that, it seems like. But as a run defender, he's good. That's where he's strongest. Josh Allen's a solid run defender. I got to call him Joshua Hines Allen now. I don't want to, but the interior, it's not really the same, right? The Mason Smith
Right.
pick, he's not a good run defender right now. Maybe he becomes that over time. And then Eric Armstead, you're looking at like PFF grades on him, because I haven't got to watch a lot of film. Like, he hasn't been a good run defender, or at least average, for 3 or 4 years. And we got to see if he stays healthy. So that's like, if I'm Cleveland and I want to win this game, very clearly you got to run the ball, probably run up the middle.
Yeah. But I have no idea if we're gonna actually try and establish the run.
Yeah.
Because it's not like Dallas did anything special defensively last week. I get it, like Micah Parsons had a decent game. I wouldn't say he had a great game. He only had 1 sack and a few tackles. But, like I was saying earlier, Dallas would, change the pocket, force Deshaun Watson to step up, and hey, there's extra defenders there to bring him down. And I'm just like, people still think he can get back to the Houston version of himself where he's running all over the place and extending plays. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what evidence do we have that he can get back to that? And it's the same 3 games that people present to me as evidence. And I've harped on this a lot recently on the channel. It's been the second half of the Baltimore game from last year, the Arizona game from last year, the game against Tennessee from last year. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you credit for the Baltimore game, but are you really trying to make an argument in favor of Deshaun Watson based on the Tennessee Titans and the Arizona Cardinals? No disrespect to either of those teams, but they were not good last season. So,
Yeah, and they're teams that, like, they have upward trajectory, I would say, but yeah, we got to be realistic about where people are. And it's just hard with Watson. He hasn't really looked like the same guy. And I got sent something interesting on him where apparently their head coach in Houston had to pretty much like transform the whole offense for him to what he did in Clemson. I don't know if that's true. I saw them talking about this.
Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, have you seen that rumor? Is there anything to that? Like, is he just not able to run like an NFL offense? Or?
I really don't know. I mean, honestly, like, I didn't want Deshaun Watson from the very beginning. When I heard we had acquired him, I didn't run around the house screaming like, "Oh my God, we got Deshaun Watson! Yay!"
Yeah.
I mean, I was just like, okay, because one, I didn't want to give up on Baker Mayfield, even though he didn't really end up working out in Cleveland, but
he was hurt too. Like,
right.
I don't want to rub salt in that, right? Like, that's not my intentions, but that's
you're
part
fine.
of it that's like crazy is that he played that season hurt, and they bailed on him so quick for a player that he didn't start for almost 2 years in the NFL. I mean, I don't think that was at that point, but it was about 2 years he hadn't played. And with all the things going on and what you had to pay for him, and we almost, as Jaguars fans, should like hate you guys just because of what it did for Houston, because they've gotten so many players out of that deal. But it's,
trust me, as a Brown fan, trust me, as a Brown fan,
have to tell you.
I'm not afraid to admit it. Houston not only won that trade with us, they fleeced us. I mean, look at where the Texans are and look at where we are. 2 different stratospheres, really. Or should I say 2 different Stroud-spheres. that's a nice little play on words there. But it's just like, part of my issue with Baker is, like, I think he tried to be too much of a Cleveland tough guy. And what I mean by that is, like, I think part of the stigma, if you will, when it comes to living in Cleveland, is that it's like a working man's town, blue collar type of city. You know, I know the steel mill was popular here in the early years, in like the 80s or 90s, something like that. I don't know the full history of Cleveland. I haven't tried to do my full research on that, and I'm not going to. But you get my overall point.
Yeah, I get it.
And I think he was trying to be too much of a Cleveland tough guy by being like, okay, I'm not going to get the surgery. I'm going to show that I'm just like the rest of you. I'm going to show that I am a Clevelander. I'm going to play through it. And it didn't work out. But you look at it, I'm like, to go back to last season, was it Deshaun Watson that got us to the playoffs? No, it was PJ Walker, it was Dorian Thompson Robinson, and of all people, it was Joe Flacco.
And
Go.
that's where you can maybe feel okay though. If you can figure out a way to fix the quarterback position at some point, which it's disgusting
Have you
cap-wise,
seen
right?
the long list of starting quarterbacks that have gone?
I'm aware, but
Then again, you should
you
be
guys
familiar with that yourself in Jacksonville. You've had a long
well,
list.
we like to give players that clearly aren't going to work out like a really long period of time, or do that with
Nick
our
Foles.
GMs. Yeah, well, I mean, actually, we got
Sorry.
rid of him pretty quick. But,
Yeah, you did.
Sorry,
I
you're
had
good.
a little frog in my throat.
No, you're good. I've been like coughing all day. I'm just glad I haven't done that more here. But Cleveland, they have done such a phenomenal job outside of the quarterback position. That's maybe where you can hang your hat if they're able to figure out something. Because, like, hey, if this season goes south and things really don't work out for Cleveland, go get Carson back. Go get someone in this draft, because you are going to put them in the best situation of anyone in this class. I mean, I'm just saying, like, if they just can admit it, and maybe with this new accusation, they're able to get out of the cap charges. That's possible. I've heard that at least. We'll see, of course, because who knows if anything comes of it. But
Right.
maybe you're in a great situation at some point. Obviously, you lose all the first rounders, but that's done, right? They've got picks now. They're not paying anymore. And maybe you go into the offseason and there's hope again, but you never know.
Right.
It's a rough situation. I think with the Baker Mayfield side of the conversation, that's not nearly as much of a problem as the Watson side, right? Because if you went a different way and Mayfield was like good with Tampa, it's like,
Which,
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
dumb, but it's okay.
yeah.
Made a
I
mistake.
mean, he wasn't good in Carolina, and he wasn't good with the Rams, but heck, he got the Buccaneers to the divisional round of the playoffs last year, and you could argue Tampa should have beaten Detroit in that divisional round game last year. That's going to be a fantastic matchup, by the way, this week in Detroit.
Yeah.
But I know that Jameis Winston didn't have a great tenure with Tampa Bay, and his tenure with New Orleans was a bit hit and miss. I get it. But honestly, I know I know the massive contract we gave to Deshaun Watson. 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed. Looking like one of the worst, if not the worst contracts in NFL history. I'm not afraid to admit that. If I'm the Browns and I'm Kevin Stefanski, I'm going, sorry, Deshaun, you don't have it. I'm sure the Jaguars are fully preparing for Deshaun Watson this Sunday. So why not come out and say, oh, yeah, we're not starting Deshaun on Sunday in Jacksonville. We're starting Jameis Winston.
It would be a great idea. I mean, genuinely, I think they would have a much better chance. I still think they have a chance with Watson, just because I could see them dominating on the ground enough to win the game. But yeah, it's rough. And I heard a good quote earlier this week. It
Uh-huh.
was, if you're in a hole, stop digging. And it's what Cleveland's got to do with this. Like at this point, Watson's not your guy. Just because you want him to be the guy doesn't mean you keep digging the hole deeper. And
Yeah.
obviously the money is the way it is, but just move on. Put Winston on the field. He's going to be better. The thing with Winston is he's at least going to move the ball. Like,
Right.
you're going to get some bad plays, given you're also going against the Jaguars secondary that just lost their best player, but you're going to be able to go down the field and score. And it might be good enough. And I think you'd have a better season with that. And at that point, see what you got to do. But I think at the end of the day, like, going in this offseason, if they can get their hands on a top guy in the draft, I think they kind of got to go that route, especially with the amount of good players that Cleveland has drafted recently that are going to get paid now. You can't go pay, a ton of money to another quarterback on top of Watson's deal and then on top of paying your whole roster.
Right.
It's suicide.
No, I totally agree. You mentioned Carson Beck earlier as an option. My personal preference would be the guy who's, I think, started at Houston, transferred to Washington State, and now plays for the
Yeah, Cam Ward.
Yes.
He's fun. He's really fun. I have him, I think, is like a borderline first rounder now, and he might make it into the first round.
He would be my personal pick, but I can also understand why you're suggesting Carson Beck for the Browns. I can totally um, uh, appreciate and understand where you're coming from with that. Um, it's just I like the style of Cam Ward a little bit more.
And I think he would probably better represent your team too, because the whole thing with Beck is there's two things. One, how is he gonna elevate a team in clutch moments, and then two, what is his leadership right now? Like, he's on a team that has a ton of talent. He hasn't really stepped up in the big moments in the way you want to see, and I don't know if like his personality represents Cleveland as well. So I'll say it like this: from an outside perspective, like, where do I think it's best for Carson Beck to go? I would say it's Cleveland. And I think that's the one that probably could work out the best right off the bat and is the safest of them all. Because you're getting Jared Goff, right? You're getting a very good Jared Goff, and you see how he's done in Detroit. And they might go win a Super Bowl this year with that because they built around him. And I think the Browns have built their roster really strong, just like Detroit has in recent years, different styles. But like, I look at offensive line primarily. That's a unit where I think they can keep him upright and he can play at a really high level and be good. But if I was a fan of the Browns, I'd probably want Cam Ward if I was getting one of these guys.
Yeah, like I said,
I think he could be the fun one and the one that has
Cam
maybe
Ward
the
is
highest
my
ceiling.
preference. But talking about offense, your offense has gone through I would say, a bit of a drastic change this offseason because you let Calvin Ridley go to the Tennessee Titans. Granted, I don't think you were going to give him the type of contract he got from the Titans. Then you go out and you draft Brian Thomas Jr. Great pick, by the way, to essentially replace Calvin Ridley. And then what do? You go, oh, Gabe Davis, you're not going back to Buffalo? How about you come be another weapon for Trevor Lawrence? So now, when I look at your skill position group, because that's always the area I tend to focus on, because I'm more about the skill position group than I am quarterbacks. I just think quarterbacks tend to get way too much credit. Like, for example, if Trevor Lawrence makes like a 15-yard pass to Zay Jones, and then Jones turns it into like a 30-yard play, I feel like most people are going to say, oh, did you see the throw by Trevor Lawrence to Zay Jones? And whereas me, I'm going to be like, wasn't it Zay Jones that took a play that was designed to be, a 15-yard route and turn it into a 30-yard gain? Do you kind of get
I get it. It's more fun, I think, to hype up the quarterback too, and then you also throw in the alpha wide receiver one if you have one, and we hope we have that Brian Thomas Jr. We'll have to see. I'm not going to sit here and say that's like already the case week 2, right? Like it's not time for sweeping statements, but it looks really good so far. The whole Calvin Ridley situation was crazy. The most views I've ever got on a video was my rant immediately after he went to Tennessee, which the way it happened was just obnoxious because they basically put it in writing that we cannot sign him until this hour of this day because we'll give up a second rounder instead of a third rounder. And so Tennessee read that, planned for it, and came in at the 11th hour, offered a huge contract, and Ridley went from, waiting to re-sign with Jacksonville to he was gone. It was a huge fumble by the team, but they've pivoted very well. But I have my issues with obviously how do you get there? You did this to yourself. You put yourself in this situation. Maybe you're lucky with how things have played out, or you pivoted really well. But that was probably one of the craziest things I've ever seen as far
Yeah.
as an off-season move.
But I look at your wide receiver group, and we already mentioned it. You got Brian Thomas Jr., you got Gabe Davis, you got Zay Jones, you got Christian Kirk. I would even throw Evan Ingram and Travis Etienne in there because you do use Travis Etienne in the passing game a little bit. I've seen it.
He's good for fantasy football.
Yeah. But I really like especially, again, I'll throw Evan Ingram into the group here, even though he's a tight end. But I really like your wide receiver group with, again, Kirk, Thomas Jr., Jones. You got Davis. Again, I'm throwing Evan Ingram in just for the sake of
he is a receiver. I mean, he's a slot receiver essentially.
Yeah.
The way he plays.
So I really like your wide receiver group.
Yeah,
I have to say it.
It's a really good group. It's a promising group. They're very much tied to it for a while, and I think definitely the underrated part of it is the backup, Parker Washington.
Mm-hmm.
He has been awesome to watch, and there's a little bit of dialogue right now with fans on, is he the future in the slot? Is Christian Kirk going to be here a year from now? That's the only guy they could really pivot off of. But Kirk has been awesome for Jacksonville, right? It's a really confusing conversation because of that, because it feels like you lose either way in some regard. But this is a really good receiving core. I think it's going to be more diversified as Brian Thomas Jr. becomes a better route runner because if he wasn't, he's kind of similar to Gabe Davis, big bodied receiver that you throw vertical to. And Christian Kirk's a really good route runner. But I think they're diversifying more. I think they've got a lot of ways they can threaten the defense. And it just comes down to play calling and the consistency and the big issue that you get into and why Jacksonville isn't this like Super Bowl contender right now. And I hope they change that, of course, but this is where they are, is the offensive line. And that's where this game could be lost for Jacksonville because they haven't really done a whole lot there. Mitch Morse might be fine. He might be good enough, but he's also a veteran who's, kind of gone downhill a bit. Not saying he's all the way at the bottom of the hill, but like he's digressing. Same thing with Brandon Scherf, who's, still a good pass protector, but nothing in the run. Ezra Cleveland is a player who has been kind of good at one or the other, usually the run game, but not really been an incredible starter. And then
wait a minute. Did you say Ezra Cleveland?
I did, yeah.
Can you trade him to us just now?
I don't think we could do it now. For Greg Newsome?
I'm just saying that because of his last name, Ezra Cleveland.
Oh yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, it was actually kind of crazy we got him because he was a random guy I called out before the trade deadline last year. I was like, wait, why don't we target this guy? He had the same OL coach as we have. That OL coach was in Minnesota when he got drafted, advocated for him. He has been better in 2023. And he ended up coming to Jacksonville, and then he didn't have a good year because we collapsed. from the point he got there because it was like San Francisco game, and then eventually Lawrence got hurt and things went downhill.
Right.
But the offensive line, the interior is I think okay in pass protection. At the end of the day, they really are not good in the run game. And the tackles, surprisingly, Anton, our first round pick, did not look good in the first game. He looked like he just didn't care almost on plays. I'm not going to say he really didn't care, but it looked like it. And then, Cam Robinson's getting put on a highlight reel for doing stupid things. He's getting paid $17.5 million. It's not even guaranteed. It's like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? So that's the
So
problem, and why this isn't like looking like a Super Bowl caliber offense right now. Why
right.
it's so
So
up and down.
yeah. So I'm looking at our unofficial depth chart. This is off the Browns website, and it says Jedrick Wills and um let's see. Yeah, Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin are both projected to start, but neither of them played last week. I don't expect them to play this week, which means it's going to be James
Yeah,
Hudson on the left side, and it's going to be DeJuan Jones on the right side. And
Dewan's good.
if you saw last week, we were doing single coverage against Micah Parsons, and well, you know how that worked out.
Yeah, it doesn't work out.
No. And we're going against Josh Hines Allen this week, and I wouldn't say he's necessarily the caliber of Micah Parsons, but he's no slouch. I obviously don't mean that in a disrespectful
But you're
manner.
good. He's like bottom of tier one right now, and he's got to prove it consistently. And he's got some questions too, just because he underwent a size transformation this offseason because they said they wanted him to get bigger to play all over the defensive line. He still hasn't played all over the defensive line, but he went up from like 255 to 285. So it's that's something I'm kind of watching right now.
Yeah,
But man, dude, DeJuan Jones versus Trayvon Walker, like sign me up. That's got to be so much fun to watch, right?
yeah,
Like
you would
two
think
huge
so.
guys that can move well.
We'll see. Um, but as of right now, Njoku, I believe, is injured for us, which means it's going to be Jordan Atkins as our starting tight end. I don't really know much about him. So there's that. But like we've got Amari Cooper, we've got Elijah Moore, Jerry Judy. It's an
Yeah,
okay wide receiver group. I would say Jack. When I'm looking at comparing, your wide receiver group, again, I'm including Evan Ingram in there, versus our wide receiver group, I would give the edge to Jacksonville, honestly.
yeah, for sure. But then you look at the matchups, right? Like Jacksonville wide receiver unit versus Cleveland defensive back unit, and then vice versa. Cleveland wide receivers versus Jacksonville DBs. I think Jacksonville could win as the wide receiver group. I don't think they win as a defensive back group unless it's Watson that plays so bad that they can't do anything
I
because they've
mean,
got all these injuries. And then, you got Cleveland that, man, they just man up. They have all these guys ready to go on the defensive side, and they play really damn good football that way. It
yeah,
is the best cornerback room in the NFL.
yeah. I like our defensive back room with my I almost said Miles Garrett. No, with Grant Delpit, Greg Newsome, Denzel Ward. But
Yeah, it's
like
good.
my problem though is like, you know, all three of them, and we, I almost forgot Thornhill. I forget his first name. We got him from Kansas City, but like you look at specifically Delpit, Newsome, and Denzel Ward. I'm just like, can you guys stay on the field? Because, you
Yeah,
know,
that's the problem.
like you look at it recently, all three of them really have had some type of injury at some point where you're like, okay, I'd like to see Greg Newsome be out on the field against Tyreek Hill, for example. And nope, he's injured. Or we're going against Cincinnati this week. Okay, that means we're going against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. can our defensive or cornerback room, whatever, however you say it, defensive back,
Yeah.
be healthy? Nope. Denzel Ward is out with an injury, or Grant Delpit is out. And I'm just like, ugh.
It's killer because you just get left with this hard decision, right? If you are choosing who's on your team, because you give up a great player and you avoid the injuries, or you deal with the injuries, it kills you at points, but you have incredible play on the field for a lot of the season
Exactly.
still. But
I'm
Newsome, dude, I saw he played CD week 1. Man, that performance was really freaking good. Like he, I know he's the guy I mention a lot because I wish Jacksonville would trade for him. I know he was on the trade market this offseason a little bit, and maybe someone they could have gone after. They obviously haven't. And Jacksonville's a weird team where they kind of want to make sure they win the trade for sure, no matter what happens when they trade. So they always lowball everything, and it works when you trade, but it also, you know, bites you in the ass when you don't because you don't get the player you want. But yeah, I think like Newsome's phenomenal. He can do everything really. I think run defense was the only thing that he's had any kind of questions in, aside from injuries, from what
yeah,
I've seen. And then Denzel Ward concussions hurt him, but great corner. And Martin Emerson is
yep.
seemingly
He's
kind of underrated.
didn't we? If I remember correctly, we traded with you to get Martin Emerson.
I don't think that was the case. It was Ronnie Harrison
That's
was the
it.
guy you trade with us for. I don't know what
That's
happened of him, but I know
that
he wanted out when he got traded.
that was it. I thought it was Martin Emerson, but you know what? You're right. We drafted Martin Emerson. We trade with you to get Ronnie Harrison. I don't think he's with us anymore. I'm not.
I don't think he is. I think I saw something maybe this offseason about him potentially going
So
somewhere else. He's with the Colts, it looks like. They have him
yeah,
listed as a linebacker even, which is wild.
yeah. So um, we have Devin Bush as our Sam linebacker. I don't know how to feel about Devin Bush being here with us because, you know, the Steelers traded up to get him, and he didn't seem to really pan out in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. And if I remember correctly, he then went to Tennessee, right? Or am I thinking of Bud Dupree?
That's Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree went I know he went to Tennessee. I don't know with Devin Bush. I think
Okay.
Dupree's with Houston now.
But either way, I look at our linebacker room. We got Jordan Hicks. You got uh, Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah, Devin
That
Bush.
was a favorite of mine.
Um, I do miss Sione Takitaki. I know a lot of Browns fans are the opposite of me, but in this case, the reason I miss him is because when he was with us, I don't know where I came up with it, but I always like to take his last name and say Taki Taki Taco. It was just some random thing that I did. Never actually um, made a Taki Taki Taco, so don't know what a Taki Taki Taco is, but it was just something I
I
did.
I got a weird one for you on that note, actually, if you don't care.
Okay.
So we were at Chiefs training camp because I live like right by where they go to training camp, and I was with my friend Griffin, and we were watching training camp. We were looking at the roster for the team, and I was looking at like the draft picks they had because that's my thing. I love the draft, and one of the guys they had at the time who hadn't who hadn't played a snap of football yet was this guy named Isaiah Pacheco. And I looked at his name. I was like, you know what, man? This name might end up being. I don't know why. I just feel like this is the name of a player who's going to be like really good in the NFL. And I, of course, never drafted fancy, which was stupid. But we always like have this joke where for if it's kind of dumb like that. You say Taki Taki Taco. We would like we're thinking of like a chant for him. It was just like Pacheco Pacheco Pacheco. There's nothing you can do though. You know,
Yes.
there's no words I can think of that would rhyme with it.
Yeah. So according to Wikipedia, Devin Bush went from Pittsburgh to Seattle, and now he's
Okay.
with us.
That sounds right.
So, but never know with uh, Wikipedia. I don't fully trust it. But anyway, it's just like, you know, how do you think your offensive line is going to do against our defensive line? Because we're coming at you with Myles Garrett,
Are you?
Zadarius Smith.
Is Miles playing?
I
Wasn't he hurt?
think.
That
I
that
don't
was
think so.
that was the big thing because if he plays, it's gonna be bad, right? And I saw Grandizer mentioned like it was hard to sack Lawrence. I don't think that's gonna be the case. If you got Miles Garrett and who's the other pass rusher you had, I already forgot his name. I know he's good.
Zadarius
Uh,
Smith.
Zadarius Smith. I mean, that's gonna be a tough matchup. I could see Anton getting his stuff together this week and maybe doing well against like Zadarius, but Cam Robinson, I don't know. Like he's a
Yeah.
little questionable right now. So I think our offensive line could struggle with those two guys, and then you had some other ones you were going
Yeah,
to
we have
mention.
Dalvin Tomlinson as our left
It's
defensive
good.
tackle, Shelby Harris as our right defensive tackle, um, and then we have for our second line of defensive end, we on the left side we got Ogbo Okonkwo, former Houston Texan. Um,
Okay.
Maurice Hurst is our backup left defensive tackle, but I believe he's injured right now. Quentin Jefferson is our second for right defensive tackle, and Alex Wright is second for right defensive end. So,
It's a good
but
unit. It really
yeah,
is. And I mean, you got your good linebacker core. JOK was a guy I wanted for Jacksonville in the draft actually at the time because we have this incredible linebacker core now, but we used to not have like anything except for Miles Jack. And he was a guy I liked a lot. I thought was probably going to be a first rounder. Fell to Cleveland, and rest is history. He's a really good player. But it's a
yeah,
good unit.
yeah. You mentioned Miles Jack of course, when you mentioned Jacksonville, one of the first things, at least for me, that I remember is Saxonville and that
Yeah,
defensive unit you had back in 2017, which ironically, that was the year Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl with Philadelphia. And of course, he's now your head coach. So I'm curious, as a Jaguars fan, what are your thoughts on Doug Peterson as your head coach? Have you been satisfied with him?
Hmm.
Are
Let me see
like
on this one. I feel like I've thought about this recently.
okay,
No, so the first year was like, this is awesome, right? Like
right? Yeah.
everything you need. And I think I'll say this, regardless of what happens this year and in the future, of all the head coaches that were available when Doug Peterson was in the cycle in 2022, I think they made the right decision. I don't know who you're talking about, unless I might be forgetting a name, but who would have been better, right? Like this was a team that had a massive culture issue. Urban Meyer tore this organization down to the ground. He destroyed his franchise quarterback the first year, almost
Oh,
broke
I'm
him.
so
I mean, it took.
sorry. Urban Meyer was ever
It's
your head
okay. I
coach.
mean, we have Urban Meyer, you have Deshaun Watson. We've all got our things. So I get it. I'm
And the
just kidding.
Pittsburgh Steelers had Ben Roethlisberger,
That's true. That's true. That's true. Equally bad.
even though he made
They're
himself
both
very
all bad.
comfortable. Yes, even though Ben Roethlisberger had his off the field issues, but he made himself very comfortable when he came to Cleveland to play the Browns. But
Yeah,
continue with what you were saying.
for sure. So I'll say that. I just want to preface with that. I'm not sitting here like, oh, we shouldn't have hired Doug Peterson. But why he was such a good hire at first was because of the culture. This was a team that didn't have a good culture. This was a team that people didn't want to play for. Had a lot of problems. The only good thing Urban Meyer did was bring in the facility that we have now, which is really good. But Peterson has some problems, right? For some reason, we don't really fully understand why he is willing to die to defend his OC, no matter what his OC does. Press Taylor, like they were denying interviews for him the first year. And then the second year, it's like we're talking about him getting fired, and we have we have a guy we follow on Twitter. He's like kind of a Jaguars insider. He's been at least like spot on what's been going on. Sometimes he'll predict something that maybe comes close to happening and it doesn't, but it's really good for information. And
Yeah.
he was talking about like this last offseason, like there was a bit of a war inside the building with whether Press Taylor should stay there. And Doug has just been tied at the hip to him no matter what. And he doesn't want to call plays. He was told, we think, by the owner that he needed to call plays this year. He would not tell us if he was doing it. And so his loyalty to this one specific guy, which is also involved throwing the defensive coordinators under the bus. He already did it week one in his one of his press conferences this week, just saying like they got to coach things better on a certain play. I think it was like the Jalen Waddle huge reception he had in the game. But I have issues with Doug for that. I question, how he's building this team in the trenches. He's not really been super honest, I think, with the fans in his interviews. He was getting upset with reporters just this week. I have a lot of questions about him. At the end of the day, for me, like if I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with this team, which you could just simply think like, oh, okay, Doug Peterson's already won a Super Bowl, he can do it. If you can't win a Super Bowl with this team, though, which I have very serious questions about, shouldn't be here, right?
Yeah.
And so I think by the end of this year, I think it's very possible he's gone, and we'll have to see what happens. But it's not a good start, And when you don't have answers to your problems, that's kind of the tipping point as well. When you're getting asked in a press conference about something and you just can't answer the questions. For some reason, after week one, we're like way closer to that than we should be. Not all the way there, but way closer. So I agree with the hire. I don't think if I had a bet right now that he's going to be the right guy, but it's not the final verdict yet.
So I'm kind of in the same boat as as you are about Doug Peterson when it comes to Stefanski. Because he's won Coach of the Year twice since he's become our head coach. He's gotten us to the playoffs a couple times, but it's like he had a rocky relationship with Baker Mayfield. He was supposed to be the guy that once we acquired Deshaun Watson, it was supposed to be like, okay, it's the offense is going to be fixed now and it's going to all turn out to be great. And it really hasn't turned out that way,
But how does it with the quarterback situation?
Right. That's part of it. It's interesting. Like when Deshaun Watson was going through his 11-game suspension, we had Jacoby Brissett as our starting quarterback. I think we went 4-7 in that 11-game stretch during Watson's suspension, if I remember correctly. But like in Brissett's final start before Watson came back, who did he beat? Let me think. Oh, yeah. Arguably the GOAT, who might get replaced by Patrick Mahomes. We'll see. I don't want to get into that whole discussion.
It's too early.
Right. But think about it. Jacoby Brissett, in what turned out to be his final game in Cleveland as an opponent, Jacoby Brissett beat Tom Brady. Like, doesn't that, to me, that carries a bit of weight. Like, he beat the Carolina Panthers in week one. The Browns winning a game in week one is not a common thing. Like, prior to this season, we had won 2 straight in week one against Cincinnati and Carolina, but, it's not a common thing. So,
yeah, I get your concerns. It's hard, and I have to ask, like, do you guys know, like, exactly who would it? Is this the decision to bring in Deshaun Watson? Was that like a collaborative, everyone completely on board thing between the head coach, the GM, and the owner, or was this like more so one person's responsibility. Sometimes they'll disagree on things. Someone, has the power in the power struggle. Do you guys know anything about that? Like whose decision at the end of the day?
Honestly, I think that was if I don't know for sure. So
Okay,
but from my this is just my perspective.
sure.
It feels like that was more of a ownership decision with Jimmy Haslam and D Haslam because we kept hearing statements like we want an adult to be our starting quarterback.
Oh, that's a brutal statement. Feel
Do
bad. That's gonna be like a bad quote of all time.
you remember do you remember hearing like some of those quotes from
I remember that one
yeah.
specifically. I always remember what was the line they kept saying? We felt we had to get more. We had to get comfortable with Deshaun Watson, the person. They kept saying that like over and over
Yeah.
at the introductory press conference.
What was like one of the other annoying thing that really annoyed me about Baker Mayfield, besides the whole being too much of a Cleveland tough guy, like I mentioned earlier,
Yeah,
was like he had all these progressive commercials, like outside the Brown Stadium or whatever, and then he would go out into the field, and I'm like, what? Like he had more commercials than wins. And yet here I am, because of the way Deshaun Watson has played or lack thereof, and the way Baker Mayfield has played in Tampa, I'm just like, I want Baker Mayfield back. Now, obviously, Tampa Bay isn't going to make that trade, and I don't think the Browns are going to try and make that trade, but
they
that's
never could. Yeah,
that's part of the reason why I'm saying, like, I want Jameis Winston on the field, even if that means we go 8-9 this season, miss the playoffs. I'm like, well, at least I can feel better about our quarterback situation than I did with Deshaun.
yeah. I think it's about getting to a new era, right? Even if this is obviously not like your long term plan quarterback to have Jameis Winston, but just resetting things, right? And it leaves a disgusting taste in your mouth when your team keeps going down a path that you can't support, that you don't really believe in.
Right.
And it's hard. You want it to end at some point. And I think Grandizer, I'm imagining you're saying this is more so the ownership's decision, right? Not listening to the fans.
Yeah. I would say this was more of ownership's decision, not so much listening to the fans. But I feel like the Browns have a history of doing this, not of bringing in like controversial quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson. That's not what I'm saying. But it's like when they draft a quarterback or they sign a quarterback through free agency, whatever, they try to like fit a square peg into a round hole. And what I mean by that is like, you know, they don't look at what the quarterback strengths were, whether it was at college or their previous franchise in the NFL,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think of the word off the top of my head, like conform, if you will, the
Yeah.
offense to fit their skill set. Like that's part of the reason why I think Jacksonville has had a bit of success with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. I do understand your perspective of Doug Peterson though, by the same token, but like I feel like once Doug got to Jacksonville and was able to really institute his offense, he looked at Trevor Lawrence and said, okay, he does XYZ well. Let's try to construct an offense that fits his skill set. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're right. And I think with Doug Peterson, it's more so a question of does your philosophy that you're doing work in the NFL? And I think it can, right? I also question how they implement it because there's obviously questionable decisions with GM.
Right.
And then it also comes down to, you know, why I have why is the culture the way it is right now, in the sense that the players, you know, they don't step up in big moments anymore. They all expect someone else to. The interview I always remember the most from last year was listening to Josh Hines Allen
Mhm.
talk about, why the team collapsed, because he was getting asked, I think, at the end of the year after they lost to Tennessee. And he basically said that, like, everyone in the building was looking at someone else to step up. First thing I think, kind of getting off topic from Doug, is like, why is Trevor Lawrence feeling that way? If he is, or why is he not the one stepping up? And I don't want to go too hard into that, but that's a big question. Why is this team so even keel about something so embarrassing? And why is it not changing now after an entire season? It, Jacksonville's had this weird thing where it's like anytime they've got good, they start to underestimate their opponents. They start to put themselves above everyone else, and it bites them in the ass like every time. And Doug, I don't think has done enough to change that. I think he's kind of understood the issue, but there's things I think with his style of coaching and the way that he's leading the team that cause these things. And not all on Doug, right? But there's a lot of it you got to put on him.
Yeah. But I'm just like, when I look at some of the recent quarterbacks we've had, like, for example, Baker Mayfield, Colt McCoy, those are the two that primarily come to mind. Like, why didn't we look at what their skill sets were and say, okay, let's try to construct an offense that
Yeah,
fits what Baker Mayfield does well, that fits what Colt McCoy does well. And I'm just like, we could have potentially had success with those quarterbacks, or when we had Cody Kessler, for example. I could give you a number of different examples. I'm just naming 3 right off the top of my head, and sure, you haven't had as long of a laundry list of starting quarterbacks, but like, you
still
know,
bad.
yeah, but but like you found success with David Garrard to a certain extent. You found success again with to a certain extent with Blake Bortles. You found success for for now. We'll see how it goes the rest of the way, but with Trevor
Sure.
Lawrence. And I feel like, at least from my perspective, part of the reason you guys found success with those 3 respective quarterbacks is because, again, you looked at what their strengths were, you saw what their weaknesses were, and instead of being like, okay, we're going to force a square peg into a round hole, as I was saying earlier, we're going to try and, make the offense fit Gerard's skill set, fit Bortles' skill set, fit Lawrence's skill set. Now, from I will say this, the 2017 team that went to the AFC Championship, I would say that was more because of your defense. And of course, we all know.
100%. And the offense was just efficient enough to make it
Right.
work.
But still, like, for the most part, I would say Bortles was having success in that offense that season. Would you disagree with that? Or
Yeah, he had a good year. He really
right.
did. Like, he didn't look like a bad quarterback. You saw the moments of like what Bortles will get trashed for. The big problem was, of course, just when they were like, you know what, that's enough for me. Let's extend him to a mega deal, which
Yeah.
was a mega deal for then. It was like 24 million a year or something. It wasn't actually anything like insane when you look at like today, but yeah, it didn't work out very well.
Right. I get that, but again, I'm just like, it's again. I think it speaks to my overall point of, like, they find success based on how they constructed the offense, and in some cases, they think that's going to continue, and in other cases, the ownership or general manager, front office, whatever, thinks, okay, it worked for a couple years, but we don't think it's going to continue in the long term. We got to make changes. I mean, as a Browns fan, I could tell you all about that because, like,
Yeah,
we've had a number of different head coaches, offensive coordinators. Hell, we had Kyle Shanahan as our offensive coordinator back in 2014. Jeez.
We had Robert Sala on our team. I think that's the only example I can think of. Nathaniel Hackett was as well. We should have had Sala as a DC at some point, though.
But but it's just like, we've had Rob Chazinski as our head coach, Eric Mangini, Romeo Crennel, Hugh Jackson. Oh God, why did I even bring up that name? Greg Williams. Freddie Kitchens was our head coach. That was a total disaster. Kevin Stefanski's now our head coach. Mike Pettin has been our head coach. Ken Dorsey's our offensive coordinator now. We've had Alex Van Pelt. Like I mentioned, Kyle Shanahan. I'm sure there's a number of other offensive coordinators I'm missing. It's just been like a revolving door. And when I look at, some of the other teams, like Pittsburgh, for example, why have they had so much success? Well, it's because they keep their head coaches for a while, whether it's Mike Tomlin, Bill Cowher, or others, and they stayed with the same starting quarterback for the most part for a while, Ben Roethlisberger. I know hasn't been
they're in a
quite
weird period.
it hasn't quite been as stable, but like Baltimore, John Harbaugh, he's in like his 18th or 19th year as their head coach. Like he led them to a Super Bowl. He's won countless division titles with them, playoff appearances. Look at what happened in New England. Bill Belichick, Tom Brady. Okay, maybe that's a bad example, but like you get my overall point.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's frustrating. It is a revolving door that seems to never end. You just got to hope you get it right eventually, though. I think the hope for our teams, because I look at Jacksonville, the Browns, the Jets, and the Lions is like I don't want to call them poverty franchises, but the quote unquote poverty franchises when people think of what is kind of fits that bill. But the hope for us is you look at a team like the Lions, lots of brutal history, of course, but they finally got right. They got the guy who fit the culture that they wanted to build. He fit the city, and he did things the right way. And here they are now, having tons of success. I actually think they'll go win the Super Bowl this year, and I hope that these teams can figure that out too. And I don't know for Cleveland if it's with Stefanski or not. The thing that holds me back from saying you would fire him is that I think, man, like everything they've done outside the quarterback position's been pretty dang good. This is a Super Bowl caliber roster.
We
that
should
they
have
built.
beaten
Not
the
perfect,
Kansas
but
City Chiefs in the divisional round, but
yeah, you're a quarterback away. Even if the salary cap stuff is brutal, you're a quarterback away, right? They've
how
done
many
everything else.
times
Well,
have
that's
we
more for the
said
GM.
that as the Browns
But
fans? Good
I
God.
know, but like it'd be like okay, a Commanders fan once they might say we're a quarterback away last offseason, but we know what that means. It means like they're quarterback away from actually having hope. Now they do. They have a really good quarterback. It looks like, but I for Cleveland, legitimately, like you guys get that position right. And actually, the more I think about it, I love your idea of Cam Ward there. I could just see that, at least in my mind. But you get that right, and things change pretty rapidly. And you guys have done a great job building up your team. It's going to be a really fun match this weekend, I think, as far as the talent. But it's a question of like which team's problems are going to outshine the others. It seems like because obviously brutal start to the year. But
Yeah. I mean, the one trump card you have over us in terms of like Super Bowls is at least you guys have hosted a Super Bowl.
yeah, we haven't been to one.
Yeah, we do have that in common. I like to make this joke. Dad, what's a Super Bowl? I don't know, son. We're Browns fans.
Oh yeah, we get that with the. It's just I don't know, son. We're Jaguars.
Yes.
There's a picture you can find pretty easily online.
Yeah.
Of that.
I think if I remember correctly, the Jaguars, Browns, Lions, and Texans are the only teams that have not played in the Super Bowl. I believe those are the only teams. But at least you guys can say you've hosted a Super Bowl. We can't.
It doesn't mean much, but I guess I wasn't even alive. I don't even think I was alive then, or maybe I was.
But
Like early 2000, it was like
yeah,
2000s ish.
but I think we're gonna wrap things up because we've already been going an hour 20, and my dogs are probably getting impatient waiting to be fed dinner.
Game predictions, though, right? Are we gonna at least do
Yeah,
that?
let's wrap up with game predictions. And like I said earlier, if I don't think the Browns are going to win a game, I'm not going to pick them. I'm not one of these crazy fans that thinks, "Oh, we're going to win every game," or we're going to go 11-5, 12-6, or well, you can't go 12-6. You know what I mean, though. But so, given the way we played against Dallas last week, I don't have a lot of faith in Deshaun Watson as our starting quarterback, as we've talked about throughout this whole time. So I'm going to say Jaguars win convincingly 27-10.
It's possible. It's just I'll tell you this: if you bet on games, don't bet on this game. It's a bad one to do that for. I think for me, I think it's gonna be close, regardless of whether one team looks way better or the other. I just don't see this being a runaway unless Jacksonville explodes, but I don't think they will in that kind of fashion. They like to at least like play with you before they like destroy all hope. But I think this one we'll go with 20. You know what? We'll actually do the same score from week 1, 20-17. And I'll take Jacksonville. I'll say they win this because they kind of have to, right? They I don't know what your schedule is after this week, but we go on the road to Buffalo on Monday Night Football. They get the longest possible rest they can have. They played Thursday night already. They're already getting ready for that game. We haven't even played you guys. And then we play on the road in Houston, and then things get a little bit easier. Colts at home, and then going to London where we have an advantage, and we get to take an away game there too, which is nice now. I saw player of the game mentioned here for Jacksonville because I'd have to pick them because I'd have them winning. Gosh, I don't think it's a cornerback. Devin Lloyd's been pretty good. We didn't talk about him, but our linebacker has been. I'm just gonna go with Brian Thomas Jr. I think he has a really good game, and I think he has a great matchup. Maybe gets the best of them a couple times. It's a risky one. I don't know who I'd take. They could go anyway, but I'll go with Brian Thomas Jr. because things are starting off pretty well there.
So in terms of our upcoming schedule, we're back at home next week when we host the Giants.
There you go. Yeah.
But then we've got a 3-game road trip where we do at the Raiders, at Washington, and then at Philadelphia. And then we come home for a 3-game homestand against Cincinnati, Baltimore, and the Chargers.
Ooh. You beat the Chargers. And you never know. I mean, when you have a great defense, I think you guys have a great defense as long as injuries don't kill it. You can win any game. I mean, we saw them take down the 49ers at home.
Yeah.
Wasn't that with Dorian Thompson-Robinson?
No, that was with PJ. That was
PJ Walker. Okay, yes. Yeah, PJ Walker. That's right.
That's what, and that's exactly what I was saying earlier. Like, the reason we went to the playoffs last year was not because of Deshaun Watson. It was because of PJ Walker. It was because of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and it was because of Joe Flacco. But getting back to player of the game, I'm going to go with the Jags here because, again, I have them winning 27-10. You've got Brian Thomas Jr. I'm going to go with another offensive player. I'm going to go with Travis Etienne. I think
bounce back week.
Not so much in the rushing game, more in the receiving department. I don't know. I just feel like Jacksonville's going to use him a lot as a pass catcher out of the backfield.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And they've already kind of talked about him this week, just saying they're not giving up on him, right? Like, he's still the number one guy. I do think there's a pretty big carry split now where Bigsby's going to be a part of it. And he's looked better this year, but yeah, I could see ETN being that guy. I just have questions, obviously, with the offensive line. in this matchup because I think that's where they're weak. But receiving game, your point, that is going to be where he succeeds if he's going to have a good week. So maybe he gets an 80-yard wheel route. For all
I
we
could
know. We'll see.
I could see a scenario where maybe Jacksonville turns ETN more into like a receiving back, and they kind of make Tank Bigsby the primary running back, if you will.
Just like Urban Meyer envisioned. First thing he did, he was like, you know what? You're taking receiver snaps at rookie minicamp. Have fun.
Yeah, I could see it where I wouldn't be surprised if Jacksonville runs a few offensive plays where they're both on the field together. I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
All right, but I think we're going to wrap things up.
All right.
I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show and talking with me for, almost an hour and a half. I told you.
Oh, it's fine.
Like I told you before the show, sometimes these collabs go well over an hour. It just depends on the flow of the conversation. But thank you to everyone in the chat who was live commenting. I'm sorry we didn't get to more of your comments. Grandizer, Jacob, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's you?
Yeah, I've been talking there a little bit.
Okay, well, but I appreciate you jumping into the live chat. I'm cool with that.
It's fun.
But hey, maybe we'll do a little bit of trash talking on Twitter during the game on Sunday. Although I won't be able to watch it because I'm actually going to the Cleveland Guardians baseball game, which is on at the same time. So I'll have to rely on live updates on my phone.
Yeah, and I'm not much of a trash talker anyway.
All right. But it was great talking with you, and maybe when the Browns play the Jaguars again in a season or two.
AFC Championship,
Hey, you never know.
This year, I'm sure.
For sure, totally. But I'm down for another collab with you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
We'll talk when you guys get Cam Ward.
If we actually get Cam Ward, I'm coming back to you.
Yeah, if you get Cam Ward, invite me on to your show like the couple days after. We'll talk about it. I'll do it.
I'll do a virtual handshake with you on that one.
Yeah, it sounds good.
All right. All right. Thanks, man.
Yep, absolutely.